Well, hey, everybody. It's Thursday Live, and I'm so excited to have you back with me. And very excited about this week because I get to interview someone that I've known for a while, a friend in ministry, and someone who has made a very, very large impact. And for the very first time, he's coming to speak at Northridge, and it will be this weekend. And so I want to introduce you to Steve Poe, and here he is. Hey, Steve.
How are you, Brad?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm just really excited about having someone that I have a connection with. Not only do we share the responsibility of being senior pastors in churches that God has done some amazing things with, but we've been able to connect personally in the past. So I'm excited.
Thanks. I'm excited. I really appreciate and I'm honored that you'd have me on.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, and you know this too, one of the big struggles for those of us who really want to give our churches the best teaching, the best impact, the best experiences, when we are not on the platform, which shouldn't be all the time. I mean, it shouldn't be one voice, one person they hear from God through. But it's very difficult to find people who, first of all, have the capacity and the gifting and the ability to stand in a setting like ours, but then also have the time. And I say no a ton. I don't go and speak many places. Maybe God will change my opinion on that in the future, but you've been kind of the same way, I think. So to have you come and invest yourself means a great deal. Our people are going to benefit a ton.
Yeah, I think we're both very similar in that, Brad, is that both of us have really focused all these years on building our church and just concentrating on our people. And I've been the same way. I don't speak out a lot of different churches and when I do, I always enjoy it, but honestly, not as much as I enjoy speaking to my own people. And I think you can relate to that.
Yeah, that's exactly
right. You've got that kinship with them that is just, it's special.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but it's like, and this probably isn't true, and I too have had the privilege of speaking in a couple places, but I generally not hardly at all. And over time, it's like Northridge actually thinks I'm good, and so to go to some place that doesn't, I mean, why try that?
Yeah.
A little bit of joking, but a little bit of truth.
No, I hear what you're saying. Your people love you. And, there's just something between your congregation and yourself. There's familiarity. There's an environment that's been created, and it's special.
Yeah.
And I love it when I'm at home, and you love it when you're at home. And yeah.
True that, man. And so I'd be curious, because you've never been to Northridge before, our people have never been exposed to you. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. Let's always start with the most important thing, and it's not what we do. It's our relationships and family and that kind of stuff. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, you're right. That is the most important, Brad. My wife, Sandy, and I've been married for over 40 years, and she's my best friend. And we love doing things together, traveling together. We love doing ministry together. And so she's kind of been my right hand in ministry all these years. She's an incredible pastor's wife. Then I've got two grown kids, adults. My son, Ryan, who he's been on staff a couple times. He has 3 kids. And then my daughter, Jenny Keller, is she's on staff right now as our leadership development, and she has 4 children, and all of them live in the Indy area, which means what? Which means I've got 7 grandkids that are close by. Yeah. So that's been very, very special to have that and to watch them grow up. They're actually growing up in front of us. My oldest grandchild just went off to college, and my youngest is 11. And so, we're watching them grow up and enjoying that season.
The funny thing is we're fairly close in age. You're a little bit ahead of me, but not much. But you're ahead of me in the grandkid department as it relates to age. And Roxanne and I started young and thought our daughter did as well. all, thank God, in the right way and the right order and all of that different stuff. But we have 7 grandkids, so you're not beating us
Yeah.
there. Every one of our kids, we have 3, has been a return on the investment, at least by it one by one. But our oldest is 15, and then our youngest is actually, she 1. And so a little bit more spread out and a little bit younger. But when you said that you and I have been a lot alike in our focus on ministry, that is very true. And not every senior pastor of large level influence has been that way. And God calls us all to do different things, no judgment. But a lot do travel a lot and speak in a lot of different places and write a ton and do just a bunch of myriad things. But you and I have been a little tighter to home. And I think we've both written one book, and we'll get to yours. You wrote yours more recently than mine, but then you said that your wife's your best friend and all of that. Roxanne, my wife, and I are inseparable, and after 43 years, it's just an amazing thing. And so I can relate so much to that, focus on family. But the one place you've beat me is my kids escaped our influence. I have one that moved to Portland. Been all over the world, New York and Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia, now in Portland. And then that's my youngest. And then our oldest is in Sarasota, Florida. Used to be around us closely, but then our son is still near the church, Northridge Church. In fact, he's our director of video there. So all of my grandkids are spread. I have to travel to see them.
Yeah. I'm sorry for that because it's pretty special having them close.
Yeah, and I want to be an influence in their life, and I do have some capacity to travel, which is great. If I was locked, that'd be horrible. But we just got to go out to Portland and experience some more Portland crazy. And if you're from Portland, I'm sorry, but really, you guys seriously live in a crazy place. But I got to see my daughter and her husband, whom I love and cherish, and their son Cohen. And because of pandemic, we weren't able to go out there. They're locked down, and Michigan was locked down. There was so much going on with that. But we hadn't seen him in close to 3 years, the grandson. And so it was great. But, God calls us each to different crosses to bear and all that. So you've been married a long time. How long have you been at your present church? Tell us about your present church, where it is, and how long you've been there, and love to hear about how it all started.
I've been at Northview. You're Northridge, I'm Northview, and I've been there 23 years. Sandy and I were both born and raised in the St. Joseph, Missouri area. And God called me into ministry. I was in the business world for the first 13 years of my adult life, and then God called me into ministry. And so we pastored there in St. Joseph, in my home church, actually. And I pastored there for 13 years. And then a church in Carmel, Indiana, they were losing their pastor. He was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. And I don't know, they heard of me from a missionary. And so they reached out, and long story short, I became their pastor in Father's Day, 1999. Church was emotionally hurting at the loss of their pastor, and they were running about 500 at the time. And so the first year or two were tough, but it has just continued to grow over the years. And now we're, I don't know where we actually are after COVID, but somewhere around 12,000 with, we've got 12 different campuses. 4 of those are in prisons, which I love. And then 8 of them are in physical locations, and God's just really blessed us. And I'm humbled by that and excited to see what the next chapter is going to be.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Before we get to the next chapter deal, I'm just really curious. It's probably more commiseration than curiosity, and it's probably more to save myself huge counseling fees, being able to commiserate with someone else who's been through what we've been through the last couple of years. But yeah, you have a large community of faith. God's used, to spread out. 12 regionals, that's crazy. I love the prison ministry idea. We have a huge prison ministry as well, though we don't have 4 official campuses in prison. I'm always afraid to go to prison because I'm sure they're going to figure out that I belong there, but that's a whole nother issue. How did the pandemic really impacted us? We shut down ministry. We had no idea. I feel like I'm a shepherd, and I had no idea what COVID was going to be. It was scary. And so you protect the sheep, right? And we closed down services for a while, and then tried to wrestle through, well, how do we still do ministry to people? That's our calling, and felt like our creative team, God really used us. It expanded. We grew in amazing ways. But boy, the in-person thing, we started back, I don't know when you started. We were talking around the same time. We were close to about the same restart.
I think so.
We started just after Labor Day of 20, and with a new ministry season. Our in-person, our church has grown, our connections has grown, our community has grown, but it's a very different church than it was before. Our in-person is growing big time again, but it's just not back to where it was. Tell me about the impact, how you saw your leadership and where the church is at today post-pandemic.
Yeah, I think you and I did talk, and I think our experiences have been very similar. We started just after Labor Day as well. And so that's 6 months closed. And it goes right along with the book that I wrote, because during that pandemic and during the time we had to close our doors, we were the church world was creating some really horrific habits in people's lives. We were breaking the good habits and creating bad habits.
So true.
And then once we opened back up, we're seeing the fruit of that. And people are still, I know they're engaged because financially they're still participating. So that proves they're engaged, but they don't show up physically. There's a lot of people watching online. I'm thrilled to death, Brad, that we have the ability to have church online, but it's not the same thing. Yeah. It's just not. You just don't participate online like you do in person, and you don't have the community with one another like you do in person. And I really get concerned for those that are not engaged anymore, that it's slowly eroding away at their spiritual lives and they don't even recognize that it's happening. So, yeah, it's the same way. We're seeing growth coming back slowly, but there's at least, I don't know, there's at least 25% of the people that have just not re-engaged. They're engaged online, but they're not re-engaged in person. Mm-hmm. And I constantly throw that out, that you need to come back. You need to be in fellowship.
Yeah, and
it's tough.
And it is. You and I have been pastors a long time. I've been pastor since 1990, so 32 years. We're in the same decade, but at opposite ends of it. And when we came to our churches, and we've gone through a lot. I've had to transition. My whole book was written on the idea of transition and moving these things forward, but never faced anything like it in my life, and still trying to grasp how I believe in the promise of God just as clearly today, if not greater now than ever. He's building his church to prevail against the gates of hell, but it's about finding cadence with and rhythm with what God's wanting. And I'm still begging for wisdom on this thing, and looking and trying and doing my best to ride the wave God's creating, as you are. And so I can mirror, the commitment is still there, people's financial contributions. As pastors, we know that it's always only 10% to maybe 20% of the people that support the entire kingdom adventure in a local church. But those who were committed seem to still be committed, and we haven't suffered super greatly. There's been a little decline, but people are still invested, involved, but the percentage of the attendance hasn't. And then the creeping back. And then I've talked to people, love God, love Jesus, committed, who got so used to talking about habits, got so used to being at home and loving it, that didn't come back until we did something that drew them in. And then they went, oh, what we've been missing. Oh my gosh, I forgot. And I want to help people remember. In fact, I'm doing a series in the fall. I'm going back to the basics. I'm going to the book of Acts, and I'm going to walk through that and remind people that if it's not enough to believe in the historical Jesus, we have to believe in the present, the Jesus who's present and working today. And the only way we're believing in the right Jesus is if we understand that he built the church to be the house for his mission and his hope in this world. And people are losing that. Even we love Jesus, but not the church. And so you've experienced that too. But now you're going through something now, and then I'm going to ask you about the book in a minute. We're going to make that the big thing. But you're going through something right now, Steve, that's really hard for someone that's been committed to ministry for a very, very long time. I know it's hard for me. I only kind of know one thing, to be faithful in my calling in the local church. And that's that you're facing down retirement and taking steps. Can you tell us about that? When's that happening? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I'm in the process of going to the next season of my life, and so we have hired my successor, C.J. Johnson. We hired him last September, and the agreement was I told him when we hired him that he would work for me for 1 year, mainly because he wasn't from our congregation, so he didn't have the Northview DNA. And so I wanted him to work alongside me to learn the DNA and capture that. So he's worked for me for a year, and now I've pretty much handed over all the responsibilities. He's making most of the decisions now. My final day will be October, the last weekend in October.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and I'll pass the baton on to him. And, that's been a hard process. You alluded to that, Brad. It's been tough because after we first pulled the trigger and did this, I can remember waking up mornings thinking, what the heck have I done? I can't leave this. I mean, this has been my life. And so it was really hard. And so I found myself going through the entire grief process, all the emotions that come with grief. I went through a season of emotion where I was teary-eyed all the time. I went through another season where I was just angry. The staff couldn't figure out what I was so mad about. And then I finally hear about maybe 6 weeks ago, I hit the acceptance stage. And I'm excited now about the next season because I really do believe God's got some things that he wants me to do in the next chapter. And so I'm really looking forward to it. But it is hard. You love your people and you love, you've poured yourself into it. And to walk away and hand that baton on to someone else is tough.
Yeah, it's very much like what we've had to do with our children and our churches. Yes. In some sense, and the people in our churches are in some sense like that. And there are some parents who develop a codependent relationship on the idea that their kids need them, and so they don't allow for the journey to autonomy and growth and that kind of thing. And some pastors have done the same thing.
Brad, I've been there 23 years, and a large percentage of the people got saved at Northview Church, and I'm the only pastor they've ever known. And so it's going to be difficult for a lot of those people as well.
Yeah.
For me to step aside because they don't know what it's like to have someone else pastor them. And CJ, I'm more of a father figure now that I've gotten older, where CJ's only 38 years old. And so the whole relationship is going to be different.
Yeah.
Than what we used to.
And it'll be good, and God can use it, but it's hard and it's difficult for not just those of us in leadership stepping out, but our people. And after 32 years, most people in the church, not all, but most people in the church don't know anyone as the pastor but me. And I've been this constant presence. And so many have come to faith at Northridge, just like at Northview. And the truth is, I started seeing this a while back. It's like my voice had greater influence. It was almost like to some people, they could only hear God's voice through my voice, and it started sounding a little too similar. And I realized I've got to break this up. It's so wrong. And so you're speaking. We do summer series. It helps me because I'm able to refresh my leadership, refresh my vision, get God's voice on where I should be taking the ministry, do leadership and not teaching and studying at the same time in the summer. But the truth is, I love being on the platform. But the reason I don't get on the platform much in the summer at all is because they need to hear God speak through unique voices of different backgrounds, of different generations and experiences, and realize, and I'm trying to prepare, and I'm not making any announcements, and I'm not, unlike you, I'm not calling the dates and all of that at this point, but I am realizing the season of life I'm in, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Northridge, when God calls me to follow what you're doing at Northview, that Northridge is ready with as little grief, unnecessary grief at least, as possible. So it was interesting to hear you say that about the congregation. That's have they been responding well to the new leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, and the first stages is just him building relationships. We have a large staff, and just him building relationships. And certainly there was some staff that left, which we expected, because they came to Northview to work for me,
right?
And now I'm gone, and so it kind of pulled out their reason behind it. And but now the staff's all excited, and so now you go to the next level, which is the congregation. And at this point, people, they love his teaching, they like his personality, and so it's going well. But you know what? If I'm honest, Brad, like every other church, there's going to be people that'll leave because he's not me. And no matter who I would have hired, they're not going to be me. They're going to be different than me. And that's okay. That's okay. It's just a part of life. It's just a part of moving into the seasons that we all have to go through.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I've learned, by the way, that God grows his church as much through who leaves as who comes. And that's just part of the change process. It really is. But and the things I'm worried about, little tongue in cheek, but I'm worried that when I make the announcement and step out, it'll grow by 3 times because people say he was the only reason I wasn't coming. So I'm just actually, that's a concern I have for the new and fresh leaders, is that people will retrace back in who have their own agendas, who can create their own tension points with the vision and ministry of the church, and leaders have to be on guard against that, and not buy the complimentary, you're nothing like Steve or Brad were. So now you did something about 15 years ago. I wrote a book called Change Your Church for Good, my story of leadership at Northridge and Northridge's story and the transition and all that stuff, which isn't singular, by the way. It's dynamic, it's constant, but my principles with that. You did something different. You just wrote your first book this last year, really. It just released, and you already mentioned the idea of it because I had the privilege of reading it even pre-release and all of that stuff. But tell us about this book that you've just written, and you're going to have copies of it with you at Northridge, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I am. It's called Creatures of Habit, Breaking the Habits Holding You Back from God's Best. And basically goes into 12 bad habits in our life. And, I've always been interested, Brad, in habits. Clear back into the 90s, Stephen Covey wrote on habits clear back then. And, I've read like Atomic Habits is on the New York Times bestseller right now. And I'd read that. And it made me curious that, habits are an issue, not just in the secular world. Habits are an issue for every one of us. And so I decided to do a sermon series on it. And when I did this sermon series and started doing the research for it, I was blown away by how much habits impact our life, and number two, by how much the scripture actually deals with it. I didn't realize that. And so, for instance, 40% of everything we do during a day is done out of habit.
Wow.
40% of everything we do is done out of habit. It's second nature. We don't even give it a thought. It could be typing, it could be playing a musical instrument, it could be driving home from work, things that are done out of habit and we don't even realize it's habit. And so you've got to decide, okay, there's good habits and bad habits. What do I need to do to break the bad habits in my life? And so I list 12 of them. And I came up with a list of about 50. And I said, okay, how do I decide which ones I want to tackle? And I said, okay, I'll deal with the ones that I've struggled with. So I pulled out 12 of them that I've struggled with. And those are the ones that I did research on and did a sermon series on, and then ended up doing a book on.
That's fantastic. And the sermon series must have landed with great impact and with some motivational influence for then you to say, yes, this is definitely something that needs to become readily available to a greater group of people.
Yeah, the series went over really well. And was one of probably the strongest email comments that I have ever gotten on anything. And then on the last week of the message, Stephen Arterburn is an author, has written well over 100 books, and he attends our church. And he came up to me after that message and he said, you either write a book on this or I'm going to. So it motivated me to start thinking about maybe I needed to do that.
Well, good for you. And writing a book, even when you've done a series on the thing, is not an easy adventure. At least it wasn't for me. I mean, it was like turn yourself inside out and come down. It's such a different, I don't know about you, but I'm more of a natural public communicator. And writing is such a different medium. How did you do with the writing process? Was it as tough for you as it was for me, or did you love it?
You know, Steve Arterburn said to me, he said, I don't love to write books. I love it that I've written books.
That's really good.
And I thought, oh my goodness, I can so relate to that. It was, gosh, I would say it's probably the hardest thing I've ever tackled.
Yeah.
It's just, and what surprises people is just the comment you made, Brad, is true, is that it's very different than writing a sermon. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing at all.
No.
And you go into it thinking, well, I write all the time. This will be easy. And then you get in and realize, no, this is nothing like writing a sermon.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot.
Yeah. We have the unfair advantage when we're speaking on a platform of having the influence of our presence and our personality and all the nonverbal stuff that comes down. And then in churches like ours that know us so well, there are some advantages to that, some pre-reads. You don't, it's easy in some ways, as hard as it is. But writing, you have to create all of that. You don't have the easy, all I have to do is wink here. You know, it's like,
yeah,
it's hard. That's
really a good way to put it.
Yeah, so that's cool. Well, congratulations, by the way, having read it. And I, too, I'm fascinated with habits all of my life. John Maxwell was probably the first one that introduced me to the idea of habits and the power of habits. And then everyone used to, Covey, of course, was so good. Yeah. I stole, in the early days of my ministry, I stole a bunch of Covey's stuff and spiritualized it and changed the semantics so no one would know, you know. Which is pretty funny and true. I'm just being honest. And Atomic Habits.
We all did that.
But I'm really excited about your presentation. And if I'm not mistaken, this weekend at Northridge, not only are you going to have the book available for people who want it and all of that stuff, and get your signature or whatever may be on that thing. Just so you know, my book sells more without a signature than with a signature, so I don't know how yours will do. But you're gonna give a talk on one of the habits, right?
Yes, I'm speaking on anger this weekend. It just most people don't think of anger as a habit, They think of it strictly as an emotion, and I'm going to show them why it's actually a habit that we create. Starts out as an emotion, but ends up being a habit. And we've got to break that habit in our life because we're hurting the people we love the most.
Wow. And how relevant post-pandemic and with all that's going on in our world. When I was visiting my daughter Allison out in Portland, she was telling me that rage is at front and center out there in her world, and not with her, but I mean road rage and community rage and marketplace rage and all that stuff. And I know it's true in most places post-pandemic. So a good choice. And I'm really, really excited that our people are going to be able to benefit from that.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to it a lot. I've heard, I've known you for so long, and so I feel like I know your church, but I haven't had the opportunity to be there. I'm really looking forward to meeting your people and speaking to them.
Well, I want to tell them right now, hey, everybody, you got to be there. It's going to be great. I know it's Labor Day weekend. And by the way, Steve, when that was the weekend that came available and we offered it, I said, he's going to say no, sure as this world. He goes, it's Labor Day. I'm not doing that. But you said yes, says something about you. And I'm hoping that many of you would tell your friends and everybody else, come on in, because we're going to have a big impact this weekend. So thanks for saying yes to that. And so you're going to stay connected with the church a bit, right? Now that you're moving forward into retirement or the new season of your life, you're still going to stay connected with the church once in a while, that kind of thing? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, that's our home, and that's our home church. And we'll leave for about 7 or 8 months to give CJ a chance to lead without me in the shadows. And but then he's asked that I would speak at least 6 times a year. So we're going to be around there and be involved in some of the ministries of Northview. And but then we're also going to, just like you said when we started this conversation, I don't ever speak at other churches. And so I want to take this new season and be able to do that. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm just proud of you, if I could say it. You do it for Jesus. I get it. His calling, his redemption on your life is why you do this. But just as a fellow person that's on the same playing field, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. What you've done there at Northview is sensational. It's exciting. You're leaving it for the next generation. You gave everything to make sure it was at its best going forward, instead of using it up until you were done and then letting it die. And I just want you to know I'm in the same place as it relates to, I want this thing. I inherited a church that wasn't ready for the next generation. It was in decline, had been for a generation, 35 years. And my whole life I've said I want to use every ounce of influence God gives me in this ministry to make sure it's ready for the generation beyond me and not depleted and sucking for oxygen in the generation beyond me. I didn't want to ride the good ship lollipop into my end. I wanted to make sure I gave every ounce of influence to ministry that God has there. So you've done that, and I'm proud of you. And I, as a fellow pastor, just want to thank you for it.
Well, thank you for saying that, Brad. I love you. You're a great friend, and you're one of the great blessings in my life, you and Roxanne. And you're a 1%er, man. The people in Northridge are fortunate to have you. You're one of the top leaders in the nation. And I love your humility, and I love what you've done there in Michigan.
Well, it means a lot. And again, I wish you and I have talked a lot about, if I was up in Michigan right now for the weekend, we would have gotten together for dinner and done these different things, and can't, but we'll do that in the future. Just know I'm praying for you for this weekend, and I'm praying for you as you guys step into this new season of your life. But thanks for sharing with our people. And everybody, thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll be there for the weekend. So, Steve, thanks. And I'm really excited about being impacted by your ministry this weekend at Northridge. All right? Thanks, man.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Love you.
All right. Well, that's a guy that it's easy to love, and he's a pleasure to sit across the table from and talk to. He's just as real there as he will be on the platform. And so I just want to thank you so much, everybody, for showing up for Thursday Live. And I hope you'll be inviting people in a big, big, big way to this weekend as Steve's going to share on the habit of anger. It's going to be great. And I hope you'll be praying for him, praying for Northridge, and inviting as much as possible. Lincoln, my precious dog, is not available for the camera right now, but along with Lincoln and myself, we want to say goodbye. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you this weekend and next week on Thursday Live.